in Palestine, you've got Atef Abu Saif writing this diary in the middle of a genocidal siege. Like, this book was written, edited, and published all within the scope of the first 80 days of Israel's assault. Talking to him about how that book came together, like, he would compose a WhatsApp message to his editor in London, and to get reception, he'd either have to walk to the Egyptian border or climb to the top of a 6-story building in the midst of a drone attack to get reception to send this. Like, there are people who are risking their lives to tell their stories, to ensure access to these stories, to stand against this like right-wing assault. Like, that's what got me through the book.
Hi, I'm Joe Beal, the founder and CEO of Microcosm Publishing. I'm also the author of A People's Guide to Publishing, which distills what I've learned from selling millions of books over the past 28 years.
I'm Elly Blue, the vice president of Microcosm. We started this podcast to share what we've learned with newer publishers, so you can learn from our mistakes. Or maybe you just want to learn about the publishing industry.
Welcome back to fourth time appearance. Oh boy, we're getting up there. With a special guest star, Danny Caine, with yet another brand new book, How to Defend Books and Why. Why are we defending books, Danny?
They're under attack. It's part of a broader attack on people, really, which I think is what the argument is, originating from the political right, aimed at vulnerable people. And it is part of that attack that overlaps with my expertise and my personal history. And I think it is an interesting angle at which to examine the broader violence from the political right aimed at people who are vulnerable or who are at odds with the political right. And also, I mean, you asked me to write a book about it. Like, I think that's how it started. we were in discussions about what to do next after the bookstore book. I had thought about it. It was definitely an idea I was considering. And you were like, why don't you write a book about book bans? And it was like, well, it was something I was thinking about. So it seems like a great fit. And I do like how the 3 books kind of fit into a trilogy. I think it's 3 books that are using the lens of the book world to explore broader trends in America and the world.
And you know, for anybody new to Danny Caine or the trilogy of power, How to Protect Bookstores and Why, How to Resist Amazon and Why, and all those. Well, it's your question, but I was going to throw it as have been, to me, all those seem topical and relevant, but like they resonated far beyond my wildest expectations.
Yeah, I mean, the Amazon book in particular, every time I look at a royalty statement, I'm just blown away at how many people are still buying that book and talking about it. It's everything in that book. I think both books is still really relevant, which, like, I wasn't, especially the Amazon book emerged so organically. That was an issue that it was just one thing that happened on one day in the bookstore that fit a broader trend of what I had seen about people talking about Amazon and the lower prices on Amazon. And then, the story of that book really quickly, it went from tweets to self-publishing to Microcosm publishing to book to second edition. And so, like, it was never, they grew really, really organically. And then the second book, I was like, I want to tell the same story from a positive or more empowered lens, and like what bookstores are doing. Like, you argue so much against Amazon. What is the thing you're arguing for? And I think it's the political power of the independent bookstore. And then what happens when the bookstores themselves and those who give access to books come under attack? And that's the third. So, like, yes, they're relevant and they have legs, which I really appreciate, but they really truly organically grew from just concerns I had and questions I had that I wanted to explore through writing.
And so you mentioned that this most recent book about book censorship, book bans, really played to your strengths. Can you talk about your background knowledge and history that led you to build this argument?
Yeah, I think it came from a couple places. The issues that some of the stories I talk about in How to Defend Books and Why have seeds in how to defend bookstores and why. I mean, I spent a long time talking to loyalty bookstores in Washington, D.C. about the attacks on their drag story hours. I also mentioned the library in St. Mary's, Kansas, which was the victim of some local political maneuvering to just shut it down completely. And those stories felt really powerful to me. And it was like, well, these got to be, I think I did a good job telling those stories in that book, but they were indicative of a broader trend. And as I finished that book and I was already thinking about those issues, things happened. Like I went to the Children's Institute conference in New Orleans and did a drag story hour safety seminar, which I talk about in the book. And I hear more and more stories as Mom for Liberty kind of mobilizes. As I was finishing that book, the Moms for Liberty machine was kind of roaring to life. And then, of course, in the middle of the book, you have, Israel's assault on Gaza, which is targeted at writers and libraries, which I talk about in the book, too. And so it kind of grew out of that. And it's in the book world. I've spent, at this point, more than a decade in some professional context in books, whether writing or selling them. And then also, just like personally, in the middle of all of this, I had a kid, which reconnected me with public libraries in a huge way, like weekly visits to the library with armfuls of stuff. And like, it gave me a new love for both the public library and for children's literature. And both of those things are like right in the crosshairs of this right-wing attack on the freedom to read. So like, it meant a lot to me personally. And I knew a lot of people who were victims of it. And it just felt really important to tell that story and really relevant to my own life in several ways.
But I imagine you, like us, could not. Also, was this book Elly's idea? This sounds like an Elly's idea kind of
I
book.
think Danny pitched us this book.
Okay, nobody knows. Okay.
I remember we were like, I have the story of the St. Mary's Public Library, and then I have these two other connected stories, and I don't know. It got developed somewhere along the way.
One of the things that I like how all three books actually I think have been really collaborative and have like been an exchange of ideas, and to the point that it's tricky. I think expanding the zine into a book was definitely Joe's idea. I remember getting that pitch, but since then I think it's been collaborative to the point that it's hard to know whose idea is what.
Yeah, how it goes between the two of us, where
Yeah.
one has an idea and then the other makes it into something, and it's like it wouldn't have existed without that chemistry. So welcome to our trilogy.
Thanks.
But
Which is great. Like I'll pause to pitch a nonfiction book is usually really, really arduous, and you have to put together a really involved pitch, proposal, write a sample chapter, and like I have never lost sight of how lucky I am to have these books result from that kind of easy collaborative process.
That's how we prefer to work too, because working on a sample and working on a book are completely different skills.
Yeah.
It's like running for president versus being president. Not to be too on the nose.
Ouch.
That's assuming that there is skill involved in being the president, which is no longer.
Yeah, honestly, lots of people are recently qualified for that job. I'm just want to point out. But on a related note, I bet none of us could have predicted how much more timely and relevant this book became since we had the idea.
I was worried it would be out of date. I was worried it would be as soon as you pitched it, and then no, the opposite happened. And I'm bummed, Danny. I wish your book was out of date and not interesting.
Yeah, I've had the same thought. I mean, I started this in the thick of the Biden administration, and like in the Amazon world, there was all this great antitrust action, and we were moving on corporate monopolies and corporate power, and like. Of course, Biden wasn't perfect, but I think there were a lot of signs of hope when I was starting this book, which kind of eroded as I finished it. And now, like, it's relevant. It's really scary how relevant it is. And I think it's even more apparent to me that this is just a small part of a broader assault. And in a couple, just like watching what's happening in Minneapolis, I don't know when this is going to come out. This is happening we're recording in the middle of January. The almost like attacking people through their books feels a little quaint. Like they're just attacking people. Like there's no more maneuvering about it. They're just grabbing them and shoving them into SUVs and disappearing them. And so I think the book bans, there's still a problem. That movement is still really active. It's still, and in some ways, you worry that it's going to disappear into the background because of everything. That's the flood the zone thing that I talk about in a little bit in the book. But it really set the stage for this. In the story of what's going on, the fascists always go for books early on. That's history. And so I think we're seeing it play out again.
It feels a little bit like they were testing the waters. They were like, what will people stomach? Okay, they won't stomach like going after Democrats, but they will stomach going after trans people
yeah.
And like even the Democrats will stomach that. So
yeah, well, it's the thing that one of the most kind of insidious things about this whole thing is the way they frame arguments, the way the right wing frames arguments. And I talk about this a lot in the book, I think really consciously, is the way they manipulate language in a way that makes it almost impossible to argue against them. And so there's a lot of the word pornography is thrown around a lot or groomer or things like this. And these are about as far from the legal definitions of these terms as you can get. Like there's no way And Tango Makes Three, which is a picture book about two male penguins raising a baby penguin, is pornographic. Under no legal or dictionary definition of pornography does that qualify. Yet you have people standing up at school board meetings calling it pornography. And all of a sudden the people who are defending these books are thrust into a position where it seems like they are defending the right to give children pornography, which they aren't. They're defending children's right to read and the freedom of speech. But because the argument has been framed with this abusive language, you're already at a disadvantage in arguing against these people. And that's a microcosm that they use everywhere. Like, think about the term illegal aliens. Think about the term, like, anything. Enemies, like whatever. They so frequently use this language trick where they're misappropriating language and like turning these arguments into like bad faith, putting them in bad faith terms that isn't possible to fight against. Like it's classic, fascist behavior. Yeah. And that's a tactic that they really, really refined throughout the book ban movement. They continue to do so.
So how do people successfully counter that tactic? Like just even on an interpersonal basis, when your uncle who's been raised on Charlie Kirk rhetoric and argument style comes at you, like what do you do? How do you deal with that?
I think that's a really good question. I was really inspired to talk to Valerie from Blue Willow Books in Houston, who has a lot of thoughts about this. And I think one tactic you can use is to put it on personal terms, and this is not, try to get the conversation to where it's not you're repeating Fox News talking points. Try to get it to a point where you're talking person to person and like relying on those relationships, because like Moms for Liberty made great hay of like mom to mom connection. There's a lot of power there, as is obvious by the explosive growth of this movement. Like you get moms together and organized and they can do anything. There's like near unlimited power in a group of moms. And there's no reason that the right has a monopoly on that power. And so you have Valerie, her bookstore, Blue Willow Bookshop, is a small bookstore in Houston. It is not a blue dot neighborhood. It is a very mixed politically neighborhood. And there's not, is a lot of bookstores, my past bookstore, The Raven included, where it's kind of like a preaching to the choir situation. You just assume that everybody who walks in the door kind of already agrees with you, which is nice. There's a lot of solidarity in that. There's a lot of movement building potential in that, but that's just not how Blue Willow operates. She has no idea where the people who walk into that store are politically. And so she's like, I got to do this conversation to conversation, one mom at a time. And you deflate it. You take away the talking points, you focus on human to human connection. It's very slow work. It's tedious, but like organizing doesn't happen fast. And I think it really happens on the human level. I don't think that's perfect. I think it's very challenging, and I don't think it'll work in every situation, but like focusing on your personal relationship with your uncle, putting it into human terms, moving away from that language that's kind of been destroyed by right-wing talking points and putting this into human terms. I think there's a lot of power in that. And yeah, that I don't think I have a direct answer personally for that, which is why it was so great to talk to so many people in this book. I too kind of have a tendency to put myself in a bubble. So I was really glad to talk to Valerie and hear her experience in Houston about that.
One thing I've seen employed recently, not around book banning specifically, but in general in political discourse, where, when you're dealing with all this reframed Orwellian language, is to ask questions to draw out how the person arrived at these conclusions and agree with them where there are points of agreement. Like, I also do not believe we should give pornography to children. Why do you believe that this book is pornography?
Mm-hmm.
And, do you feel like this is an effective tactic that you've seen?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And like, ideally it works. This is one place where I think like what you're talking about is media literacy, basically, and critical thinking. And it's really important. I mean, I'm a former English teacher. I taught freshman comp for a long time. This is another place where I think the attack on books fits into the broader like fascist agenda. Is like there are forces, deliberate or not, that are like stripping media literacy away from everybody, from America. I think, if we discredit libraries, that's one. If we invent this like kind of alternative facts, like if I say it, it's true, this whole fake news thing is another aspect. And I think generative AI is the third. And it's like the critical thinking is gone. Like, you no longer have to read and process and synthesize an article, or like in my email, like I was on an email chain and without my permission, Google is just like, here's what this email says. And it puts a little summary at the top. And so like,
That was so bad.
The world is conspiring, I think, in many ways deliberately, to strip critical thinking and media literacy from people. And that's to force people to swallow these fascist talking points easier. To force people to either like best case ignore, worst case like accept, internalize this fascist agenda. And so I love the idea of being like, why do you think this is pornographic? Let's talk about what pornography actually means. And I hope that conversation can still work, but there are a lot of forces at work that would kind of take away the effectiveness of that kind of conversation.
So you pull no punches in this book, and I really appreciate that. Similar to what Joe is
pantomiming for the home videoless listeners.
And I remember just like from page one, you're like, there is a far-right Christian nationalist organized movement, and this is part of it. Can you, like, I guess, talk a little bit about those sort of underlying forces? Like, I don't know, the question I was opening my mouth to ask before all that came out was like, can you define fascism for us? But I think it's that. What's actually happening here? Can you put it, like, because I feel like anytime you have like a buzzword like fascism or book bans even, or censorship, everyone has their own spin on that they're bringing to it. Let's get into what is happening.
Yeah, this is like a peek behind the scenes of the editing of this book, because Lex and I went around and around and around about like, is it Christian nationalism? Is it fascism? Do we capitalize it? So like we were really trying to be precise with the terms, or if not, barring that, just like meaning it when we say it and not using buzzwords. When I say Christian nationalist, I mean like the remaking of America to prioritize cisgender, straight, white people and Christian, like for many people that means Christian too. I do not in any way mean to indicate that I'm not a privileged person. I'm coming from a huge position of privilege, and I acknowledge that. But like, I mean, I grew up Jewish, and even like this defining kind of moment of my childhood, it happened all the time, is like we would, I was in Boy Scouts, and there would be some event with Boy Scouts, and you say like a prayer or benediction at the beginning, and at the end of that, you would say, "In Jesus' name we pray, amen." And just like the assumption that any prayer would be in Jesus' name. And my mom used to love to yell at people about that. And she would walk up to the chaplain and be like, "Not everybody in here is a Christian." And so like I kind of internalized that, like that was formative for me, and to kind of track that. And then I spent a lot of time at the beginning of the book writing about this little public school I used to teach English at. And it extended to that. Like there was an English teacher who led a prayer at the beginning of every assembly, which is already illegal. And to make it even worse, those prayers ended, "In Jesus' name we pray." So like, what about the Jewish people? One, what about the people who don't believe in God? What about the people who believe in the Supreme Court and like Engel v. Vitale, that like you can't do compulsory prayer during the school day? And so like, I've felt it. I've felt the pressure to like blend in, to be Christian. And like, those are fairly innocent examples. I highly disagree with both of them, but compared to what's going on today, it's really insidious. And so like, because you like have a lot of very powerful people working very hard to remake America as a purely white, purely Christian nation, anybody who falls outside of that is a victim of violence to varying degrees. Whether it's you cannot read this, you cannot play the sports you want, you cannot use the bathroom that fits your identity the best, to like you cannot park your car here without being shot. You cannot go to the store without being abducted. Like it really is a violent ideology, and people are working very hard to uphold it. And like there's a straight line from "In Jesus' name we pray" at the pep rally to like we're abducting people off the streets in Minneapolis. It's all in service of remaking America as a white Christian nation. And yeah, I guess that's what I mean by Christian nationalism.
Our industry is run by billionaires and conglomerates.
At Microcosm, we wanted the freedom to independently sell our books, easily pay royalties, manage our inventory, and understand our business all in one place.
That's why we've been using our own software since 2001.
Now, we want to share it with you.
Working Lit is the only business success software that is created and owned 100% by publishers for publishers.
Join Working Lit and get the agency you need to help your business grow.
Visit workinglit.com to try it for free.
24 years ago, at a conference, I was talking to another publisher, and we were saying like, one day, let's hope, like, wouldn't it be funny if like Palestine was as important of a social issue as say like bicycling is in our world? And then like we saw that it took more than 20 years, but it did happen. But then now we're in a weird period where like, you know, Ukraine is still an issue, Greenland is now an issue, obviously horrors that will be felt for decades, but like, will this be yet another thing that is not in discourse? And I guess to our point here, like, how do you see book bans impacting that?
It's a good question. The first thing I think of is like one of the challenges with writing this book was deciding what to include. And like this, it's a question I face every time. Like with Amazon, like there was legislation, there was stuff going on. It was like, where do we hit the brakes on this and hit publish? And then, you know, some of the bookstores in the bookstore book have closed or changed their identities pretty drastically from what I wrote. And now like it was even worse in the book ban book. Like things were evolving so fast, and there were so many court cases and stories and libraries being attacked. So I really had to stop and think, like, I can't tell everything in this book. Maybe if I could write it full time and do like a 700-page hardcover, but like that, I'm not that author, and this is never going to be that book. But and that's to say, I think there's still room for a comprehensive hardcover doorstop history of the book ban movement. But like these have always been kind of more action-oriented books, which I really love about them and about Microcosm and prioritizing that kind of work. But like, so we include stories that are compelling and relevant and feel like they stand for greater things. And so I talk about Palestine, but you could just as easily have talked about Ukraine or Hong Kong. Like I just wanted to, I mean, it's a vital story. It's very, very important. And like, it could also be Ukraine. It could also be booksellers and writers in Ukraine. It could also be the Hong Kong booksellers who are being imprisoned for selling dissident literature. I mean, Russia, there are a lot of these stories. And is Moms for Liberty going to be relevant and active in 20 years? I certainly hope not. I would love for them to be a footnote. But this like right-wing violent determination to reshape a nation in their own image at the expense of everybody else has been a story for a long time and probably will be. And so I think the book hopefully will remain relevant in that way. I mean, hopefully not, actually. Like, in 20 years, can we fix this problem? I really hope so, and I'll work towards it, and all these people in the book are working towards it. But it does feel like these themes are echoes of history. And so in a perfect world, it's not relevant in 20 years, but it still might be. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but why Palestine, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, I think it was just like, in many ways, it was just top of mind. It was like really, it was top of mind for a lot of people, including myself, as I was writing this book. It felt really urgent. I think it still is. The story is by no means over. Like the Edward Said Memorial Library has still been destroyed. The Mansour Bookshop has still been destroyed. I kind of anchored the Palestine chapter around those stories. And then, like, as I was almost done with that chapter, they raided the educational bookshops in East Jerusalem twice. So like I had to go back and add that. I've actually seen people like today and yesterday writing really thoughtfully about parallels between ICE and the IDF, and how like ICE is copying their tactics, and is on the way to becoming something like the IDF. And so like it's super relevant. And I think in some ways Palestine is an extreme version of this story. Like, what happens if this stuff keeps going unchecked? Like, what happens when we go from legislative attacks on libraries to like artillery attacks on libraries? It's from silencing authors by censorship to silencing authors by like imprisonment and murder. And so it just felt like a really crucial story to tell in all those ways.
Well, thank you for ringing the bell, and I hope everybody hears it. I mean, it's hard to hear anything in the noise that you were talking about flooding the zone. Can you talk a little bit, I guess, about like, how do you pick out what is important to speak up about? How do you pick out what is important to focus on in a world where literally you could choose anything and still be a tiny drop in the bucket?
Yeah, I mean, that's why like this is something I can speak to from my experience and knowledge base. And so I'll write a book about this, but like, we need a lot of books. We need a lot of people at protest. Like, everybody needs to plug in their own way. And like for this movement to work, the movement against fascism and Christian nationalism and Trumpism, everybody needs to plug in and bring their strengths. And so like, there needs to be a book about like the militarization of policing and ICE tactics. I'm not the guy to write that. Someone is, and they should. But I am the guy to write about the fascist attack on books, because I've got a lot of experience with it. I've got knowledge. I know a lot of people. I think I can do that pretty well, or at least I can try. And so I really believe like movement and coalition building is everyone bringing their own strengths. And so if you try to do everything, you're going to burn out. And that's the last thing we need, is burned out activists. So you play to your strengths, you fit into the movement, and you do your part. Every movement needs people who are writing books. You need people who are spraying the ground with water outside of ICE SUVs in frigid Minneapolis. Like, you need people who are running for office. Like, you need all of it. And so if you try to do too much, like, you're going to burn yourself out, and then you're not in the movement anymore. And so like, why this book? It just feels like part of what I can do.
That's cool. Yeah. And I think, yeah, it's empowering to realize where you can plug in and what's going on in the world. And, there was around that same time, the GWB administration, there was a lot of talk about like that so many books were just like exposing yet another thing that you would have to be aware of but feel powerless against.
Uh-huh.
Whereas this does feel like an issue where on an individual level you can have significant impact.
Oh yeah. And like, I think that's one of my strategies for dealing with the flood the zone. And just like you look at the news and you're exhausted and you try to keep track. It's like, oh my God, you feel so helpless. Like the lure of helplessness and despair is just so powerful every day. And personally, one of my techniques for dealing with that is to zoom in and to like think locally. And what can you do in your house? I think I've been thinking a lot about parenting as activism. What can you do in your neighborhood? Who needs to be taken care of where you live? How can you help organize, activate your neighborhood? And then you move up to the city. And I think like city, county, local, library politics, you can, like, one person, it's obvious how much one person can make a change. Like Moms for Liberty has proven that. Like it's not that hard to completely take over a school board. And so that's like, if forward movement or agency is empowering, and I think it really can be, like local politics is where you start. And then like you've got a lot of people organizing in a lot of neighborhoods, and all of a sudden this movement is spreading, not from the top down, from the bottom up. And I think we've seen a lot of the limitations of like top-down political organizing. The hapless Democrats are like really, that's how you get Chuck Schumer. But like you can do a lot of good, like in your neighborhood and in your community. And there's still a lot of individual political agency in those places. And like, I think the enemy knows that. And I think, I'm seeing a lot of evidence that like we're figuring that out too.
Is there, would you say that How to Defend Books contains kind of a playbook for citizen activism in the community, or individual activism in the community for, I mean, you can tell Moms for Liberty has a playbook. They're like, here's what you do, here's your talking points, here's exactly where to go and what to say. Yeah. Like, do we have that?
We do. It's not my book. And I know that, and like mine is much more focused on storytelling and motivation and firing up the base, which is great. You need that. But I do profile the American Booksellers Association's book ban czar, Philomena Polifrone. And she has written a handbook. Like it's the American Booksellers Association. I'm missing the title, but we can link it in the show notes. She wrote a handbook that's basically like, if you're facing a book ban crisis in your community, here's what to do. And there's even in the table of contents, it's like, if you're in the middle of a crisis, skip to this page and it'll tell you what to do. Don't worry about the introduction stuff. And so there is a playbook, at least from the book's perspective, like a literal book. And I think we're seeing a lot beyond that in terms of like broader organizing in current fascist America. Like you can just look at social media to see the playbook. Look at people in Minneapolis, like they're writing the playbook with their bodies every day. And so yeah, I think like not only, yes, community organizing is important and starting local and looking at your neighborhood and your city, but like you also need to look at what other people are doing in those contexts. And like there are strategies out there. People are getting it right. I think things are happening and people are figuring out ways to make progress. And like when you network and create this like shared knowledge base, that's the playbook being written every day as we speak.
And one of the things I appreciate with how you put the book together is like you talk about that in every chapter. This is not just a book that you pick up and you're like, more doom, more gloom on every page. You have like the stories that are hard, and then you're like, here are the things people are doing that are working to address this aspect of this issue.
I mean, I wouldn't have been able to finish the book without that. In many ways, this is a really hard book to finish just because it was like I had to read a lot of bleak shit to get through, like, and just like to spend that much time like inside right-wing brain rot, like to figure out how these people think and operate. It was really exhausting. So like I would have just stopped if there wasn't some like action or like something to hook onto. And so like these stories, the characters in the book are just really inspiring. And like they literally got me through the book. Without, Philomena or Nick Higgins or Charlie and Valerie in Texas, or the Palestinian writers, like there's no way.
We built this software from scratch to solve our own problems starting in 2001.
It's not only the reason for our survival, but the reason we've been a Publishers Weekly fastest growing publisher 3 years in a row.
Now we want to share it with you.
Join Working Lit and get back the agency to understand your publishing business, market and sell your books, and painlessly pay royalties.
Working Lit, doing the math for publishers.
Visit workinglit.com to give it a try for free.
I can't write a hopeless book, not because I don't think there's a space for that, but I just don't think it'd be physically possible for me to like be motivated to do the work. And so without folks like Atef or Nick, this book wouldn't have been done.
But it's also like, what's the point of a hopeless book? There's enough hopeless books.
Yeah. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm glad you think that. I think that's what's special about Microcosm.
Well, that's low praise, but I'll take it. And so we did a podcast last year with Philomena about book bans that was, I feel, I learned a lot, which, and I think it's because we don't do children's publishing. I had a lot of blind spots and like false assumptions, but that it was really cool. And to be fair, that is probably some of the backgrounding that made this book so appealing to me. Because we did that interview. Well, no, actually the sequence is wrong. Scratch that. That just like put icing on the cake of this book.
Okay.
So, but then I think about it too, and I'm like, what you're talking about is I'm like, you could trace it through every decade where somebody, like some weirdo with like duct tape and a bad idea, like walked into a politically contentious situation and like created some like massive amount of innovation that like is still used 70 years later to great effect. But then somebody that could be like their great grandchild comes in and figures out that like leaf blowers are the perfect way to remove tear gas from a protest scene, or to that like putting water on a frozen ground will disable a militarized force, and you're like, that shouldn't be that way, but here we are. And so to me, like as like a young scrappy person, it was like reading about these kind of people that doing this in the 80s, that I was like, wow, you can like do anything even if you have nothing.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, it's just like, Valerie in Texas at Blue Willow Books, literally the front lines of the fight. She's suing the state of Texas over HB 1069, which is I won't spoil it for people who haven't read the news or aren't reading the book, but it was a huge battle. Like in a lot of ways, the freedom to read was like in her hands. And like, what did she do? She's like, I'm just going to talk to moms one-on-one in the store. Like it was almost more about that than the lawsuit for her. Or like Nick Higgins, who runs the Brooklyn Public Library and has become this kind of nationwide crusader for youth access to banned books. Early in his career, he was on the New York Public Library team that brought books to Rikers. And he tells a story about like walking around with the book carts and like prison guards coming up and be like, you can't give them that chemistry textbook because they'll use it to build a bomb. He'd be like, okay, I'll put it away. They won't take it. And then he'd like walk 50 feet down the corridor and take it back out of the bag and put it on the cart. Like it's not even legal or administrative. It's just like plucky. It's on the ground. And I love that. I don't want people to lose that. I didn't know the thing about the leaf blowers. That's pretty cool. But like, that's the playbook. I think it's so easy to get lost if you're like, oh no, the freedom to read is gone. People don't care about the First Amendment anymore. Like in some ways, like those thoughts are true. And like keeping a nationwide context is important, but it's also just like, give that one person the chemistry textbook so they can make their life better for when they get out of prison. Like these individual actions really do add up a lot.
So this is going to be, I feel like this is like a false equivalency on in a number of levels, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. We do.
What about the left?
The biggest issue with like book censorship that we have faced at Microcosm, I mean, we have definitely had situations where our customers have come to us and been like, we're not allowed to sell this at an event.
I do have some letters handy if you want me to pull on the archive, but
But like a lot of what we face is sort of internal, with people being like, I find this book to be very problematic that we have in our distribution. Like, this has, this book represents an idea that's offensive to me. We should, and we had one person who used to work for us who would advocate burning them. But we've had people throw books in the garbage at our warehouse, and we since have created a process, and I think have created more trust, in the sense that, like, if you really have a problem with a book, like, here's a way to talk about it, here's a way to deal with it, here's a way to decide. But like, it does seem like the idea of banning a book is not as anathema to even those of us on the far left as the idea of books that we don't like. Have you encountered that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it in the introduction kind of because like I wanted to address it and get it over with. Even if you even if it, like, you accept the fact that there is censorship activity on the left, if you look at the scale of it, like, only the right has a well-funded nationwide violent movement to limit access to books, and like it is connected. And like, it's also, you can look at like the next step, like with the person throwing away the books in your warehouse. You're like, I want to limit the platform of these violent ideas, or these ideas that I consider harmful. So like in a twisted way, that's kind of a harm reduction thing. And like on the right, they're like, I want this book to go away because I want trans people to go away. And like, it's, I do think there can be anti-intellectual activity across the spectrum. I think we need to keep in mind the scale and the aims of that activity. And when you look at it through that lens, it's obvious that this is mostly a right-wing thing, almost entirely. And like the violence and the damage that's been done is much, much more concentrated on the right. I do think there are nuanced conversations to have about like who gets a platform, and like what our roles are in giving those platforms to people. And those are healthy. Those conversations, I think, all fall within the First Amendment. Like, free speech doesn't mean speech without consequences. And like, that's an interesting and a nuanced conversation. I think my friend in book selling peer, Josh Cook, has done a lot of really interesting work with that conversation. But the conversation I'm having is like, only one group of people has enacted mass violence through limitation of speech.
Great point. And I think there's some validity to it. However, yes, as you point out, rather minute in comparison, is to like shadow banning on the left because of various like nitpicky infighting things. But yeah, by and large, it's still, like, voice follows power, and thus the loudest people are like, of a dominant paradigm. And there's some validity to most good faith conversations, like we talked about last time on your previous episode, but
which you remember somehow.
I do, though I don't remember much in middle age. But the other thing, like the way that we are, as we publish adult nonfiction books, so the way that we are censored most often is by institutions. We have in prisons, I guess is another big one. But for example, we have a book that was censored by like all recovery programs in the state of California for the discretion of one person. It's sort of that sort of thing,
because it had a swear in it.
It's actually
it's different.
It's a book about masturbation. So it's very dangerous, as you can imagine. And you're just like, I mean, isn't this, you'd rather have them doing this than literally anything else, right? Like, come on. But I keep that one as a little badge. By and large, I'm kind of amazed at what we can get away with, like the books we can publish without pushback. Or the worst thing happens is that nobody cares or buys them. I've had it every which explanation over 30 years where, the prison says like, oh, we can't allow this book in because of this misunderstanding or this bad faith. I didn't spend 5 seconds to like fact check my own statement, sort of thing. And so like when I'm on the phone with these people, my joke is always like, I understand that reading is very dangerous for your inmates.
But it is.
Yeah. I end the book with the prison book ban crisis, which is really where it's the most out of control. It's most visible. It's really dangerous in the school libraries, but it is absolutely unchecked in prisons, and it has been for decades, since the invention of prison, probably. And like, at least in libraries, there's like the veneer of due process. Like, you have library board meetings, you have a structure. Libraries do have policies. Hopefully they're sticking to them. But like, a prison mailroom could just be the vibes of whatever dude is working in there one day. Even if there is a policy, it's just like, I don't like this, I'm going to send it back. And like, working at the Raven, sometimes it feels like there's a 20% chance that a book you send to a prison doesn't get sent back. And then like, you don't even know if it makes it to the person. And again, even if they have a policy that says you have to let us know if this doesn't make it, like, Lord knows if that policy is even going to be followed. And there are stories I found in researching the book of like people, in their cells, seeing the book come off the mail cart and then going into the trash, like just in their sight. And it's like, it really is a lifeline. Books in prison can save people's lives. That's not hyperbole.
We get so much amazing fan mail about like us sending a book to somebody turn their life around.
And just because like that system is set up to dehumanize those people so thoroughly, and it's so effective in doing that like, this is a crisis that's happening almost silently, which is not to diminish the work of the amazing people who are fighting it and trying to enable access for incarcerated people. But like, it is, I feel like very few people understand how difficult it is to get a book to someone on the inside. And I had to write about that for this book. And hopefully it inspires people to like take action and link up with the volunteer networks who are doing this work.
Well, I want to plug our Books to Prisoners program. If you go to Microcosm and search for prison or prisoners, we have a Give Books to People in Prison product. It's a sliding scale. You can put in however much you want. We match it. We'll send books to anybody who asks us to. We get letters almost every day from people in prison being like, hey, can you send me a catalog? And we love to be able to send them books along with that catalog. Or they'll ask for specific books. Whether or not they get them, we don't know. But we do have, I would say, not a great success rate getting books into prisons, but we know how to do it to maximize that likelihood. And
it's a good, not just the fact, like you get a lot of letters that are like, hey, that was real good, can I get 3 more? But then you get a lot that are like, I will give this to every single other person in here who will touch it if you send me this book. And you're like, done.
Yeah, and this program, it helps us send more and more of the books they're specifically requesting that aren't always in the list of things we can donate. So they want a lot of unfuck your mental health books.
Yeah. Well, great. Good work, guys. Thanks for doing that.
Thanks for I guess giving us the
opportunity to plug it.
Yeah.
Up to
giving us the launching part.
Yeah. So okay. So, but like, are you seeing, and I used to volunteer in like prison book programs. So like, that was kind of where that came. And then I think it was almost by accident that somehow we got listed as a prison book program somewhere around 2004, maybe. And then we just started getting, you get a lot of mail.
Yeah.
Right. But so, and so that's, I guess, in terms of firsthand experience, that's where I've probably seen the most censorship, where it's not even shadow banning. But so where, if you looked at it in like a siloed niche, where do you think like the most concentrated book banning is happening?
Like in my experience or nationwide?
You're an expert now, so you would know.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to put the most. Like, I think percentage wise, it's probably in prisons, like the highest percentage of books that are censored to not censored. And like, there's no, it is a crisis everywhere. And like, you do have record numbers of books being censored in school libraries. Um, a library, a publicly funded library, whether it's a public library or school library, has procedures. You can look up the their policy, their culling policy, their curation policy. It's public record. The process is clear. Whether or not the book banners or the admins follow that process is a question, but like, they have transparent policies. And I think one of the most important roles that librarians play is like taxing and bureaucratically numbing as it can be, is sticking to those processes and be like, no, superintendent, you cannot get rid of this book just because little Jimmy's dad doesn't like trans people. Like, you have to follow this policy. We have it. It's a matter of public record. So even though people are trying to attack it, there is a transparent procedure and policy. Prisons, that's out the window. If there's a policy, there's no guarantee they're going to follow it. Many states, like one of the book ban volunteer projects, tried to put together a list, all of the state lists of banned books, and they couldn't. I think they got to 25 or 26. And what stopped them is that some of these lists just don't exist. Like, a state doesn't have a list of books that are banned in prison. It's just like whatever the dude in the mailroom feels like that day. And so it's really hard to fight something that amorphous. And it's like, okay, we figured out how to get books into this facility, but this facility has different rules. Like, it has to be wrapped in brown paper in this facility, but white paper in this facility. It needs an invoice in this facility. It needs to come from Amazon in this facility. And so like, it's not an easy answer to how to fix that crisis, but it's just like, you've got to work really hard and figure out facility to facility, day to day, what works in which place. And that's like, it's, it's exhausting. It leads to burnout. So I think that led that crisis to be really like out of control. But that's not to diminish where it's happening elsewhere. And like, the one thing I talk about in the book, it's like PEN America is great. Like, every October they put out the numbers, the number of challenges, and those numbers are exploding. They tripled in between 2021 and 2024. But like, a lot of book bans go unreported. Both, like, they just never make it to PEN America, and also like, you expand the idea of censorship to soft censorship, which is a really crucial idea to the book, where it's just like the political pressure leads a teacher to take a book off the shelf or to not order a book in the first place. They're not going to call up PEN America and say, I didn't order this book. I didn't order Lawn Boy. It's a book ban. Please put it in your number. It's just going to happen quietly. And so the actual number of book bans in schools and libraries is much, much higher than what you see in those PEN America reports.
So what would you say is the number one thing that book publishers can do to help defend books?
That's a really good question. And I hear a lot of criticism that publishers aren't doing enough. Luckily, thanks to like, I think what I write and my publisher, I've never felt like cut loose on my own against people challenging my books. But I would make sure authors feel supported and protected when this is happening. And again, like, having not been in that situation, I can't speak to it exactly, but I would definitely talk to the authors who are victims of the book ban and be like, what do you need from us right now? And then, like, especially the publishers of scale. And I think like Penguin Random House has done some of this, like, use your legal muscle and your money to fight these in the courts. And we have seen some examples of that. A couple successful suits in Florida backed by major publishers. That's really important because you've got, fancy lawyers in-house, you've got tons of money. Part of the challenge with the coalitions fighting this in the courts is they just run out of money. And publishers have that. So to put your weight behind the legal battles to end this, it's really a good strategy to fight this in the courts. Despite, Project 2025's efforts to reshape the judiciary, these free speech cases really do have a lot of success in the courts. These book bans are not standing up very well in the courts. And so we need to keep pressure on that. And I think publishers have a role to play in lending support to those legal challenges.
That's a great answer. Yeah. Okay. And, it was warming to see, well, Penguin Random House in a legal battle with the White House, and, not something I thought I would see in my lifetime, but like, holding their own, not backing down. I was like, okay. Didn't have that on my bingo card, but here we are.
Well,
we'll see. You'll know hell freezes over when Amazon jumps on one of these suits. We're never going to see that.
Remember that they sell books, or.
Well, do you have any final words of wisdom for our audience?
One of my main takeaways from writing this book is that it's like, in some ways, Moms for Liberty is a story about the power of local political organizing. Like, they're using it for violent means. They're using it to make the world worse. But they are using very good organizational strategies. And I think we can learn a lot about the power of local organizing from them. We do not have the power of like the Republican shadow money that's funding them, but there is no reason we cannot harness the power of community connection, of organizing in your communities to make the world a better place, whether that's about book bans in libraries or about anything else. And so in writing all of these books, I've just really been reminded of that power of good local organizing. It's not an easy answer, but I think it's the answer.
Good answer. I mean, yeah, I do. I feel like local activists are the one group that is as good at marketing as Taylor Swift or Donald Trump. Like, for real though, and it's like, it's kind of weird because you'd think like, but I do think the power is in the smaller groups because, it's like, when was the last time the Democratic Party had like a fantastic marketing initiative, or, it's just like, it's almost never, but it is like, guy running the, Amazon union protest is like, that is like all over the news, has like really sexy thing going on. And you're just like, oh, you know how to work it. That's rad.
Where it's working really well. This is, I'm in the thick of this for my day job, is with data centers. Like, everywhere, small communities are successfully mobilizing against data centers. And this is massive. This is so much money in natural resources. The most powerful corporations on the planet are being defeated by small groups of local activists. And like, if a small group of locally organized people can defeat Google, they can defeat anything.
That's right. All right.
And if there was ever a note to end on.
Thanks for joining us once again.
Please send your questions to podcast@microcosmpublishing.com so we can answer them on future episodes.
And please give us 5 stars on iTunes and everywhere else that podcasts are reviewed.
You can find us on the internet at microcosm.pub,
on Twitter at Microcosm,
on Facebook at Microcosm Publishing,
on Instagram at Microcosm_pub,
and here in Portland, Oregon on North Williams Avenue. Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful week.
Sorry, you guys edit this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It's so funny. I just didn't sleep all last night.
Oh, sorry.
All good.